We continue to go coast to coast on One Soccer today as we rehash and look ahead to our 11 professional men's soccer teams in Canada. What a mouthful that is. Today, something that's not a mouthful, the Halifax Wanderers. That is who we will spend the next quarter of an hour discussing. Second year at the helm, Patrice Gheisar, an incredible debut season where the Wanderers defied a lot of expectations, finished tied for second in points, which probably stings all the little bit more considering they were that close to CONCACAF Champions Cup play. But alas, a much different 2024. The similarities ended with a sluggish start to the season, but this time around, the Wanderers could not get out of the funk, and they ultimately wind up missing the playoffs. We've had Patrice Gheisar on One Soccer. He did a fantastic job as a pundit, but he's hoping he'll do
great job,
if not a better job as a head coach next year, because he is still high on his Halifax Wanderers despite some question marks. We know Jan Fillion will not be returning. There are some other players who are currently out of contract whose futures are to be determined. Dan Nimick, Zachary Fernandez, just to name a few. And how about Lorenzo Caligari, who is still getting Player of the Year love? So some questions about what 2025 will look like, but not getting too far ahead of ourselves. Let's go to you, Jordan Wilson, first. When you look back on the Wanderers of 24, what will you remember the most?
This is me tooting my own horn a little bit, but that loss against CS Saint Laurent at home, the look on Patrice Gheisar's face when it happened, the missed penalties. We don't even need to go with names. Everyone knows who I'm talking about as well. Like a penalty was taken and then a rebound was almost taken in a penalty shootout. Like it was weird time. But for me, they were leaking air in their tires. You forgot about
Christian Valesky.
I will never forget that. I almost took the rebound. But it just, for me, they were leaking. Their tires were leaking because they didn't score. They weren't playing well in the beginning of the season. That match for me punctured their tires. Like that was it. That was them saying, I thought CS Saint Laurent was a better side on the day. I got some shtick for saying that, but I still back down and I stand by that. But that was the icing on the cake. For me, when I look back, it was that slow start and then that loss that really just put them behind the 8 ball all season.
Oliver Platt.
Yeah, the start is definitely a big story, but for me, like that race for 5th place was not exactly an all-out sprint at times, and they had opportunities to get themselves.
It's a beer mile is what it was, Ollie. It was the beer miles.
That's a fair description. And I think largely their failure to do so was because they couldn't defend. This team couldn't keep clean sheets, conceded far too many goals. They kept 4 clean sheets all season. That was the fewest, the joint fewest in the Canadian Premier League. They were tied for the league worst, 43 goals conceded with Vancouver. And when you drill down into it a little bit more, you can see like Valor conceded a lot of penalties. Vancouver had problems from corners. Halifax were just poor in open play. They conceded the most goals from open play with 32 in 28 games. So, you saw a defense that had some really strong performers, I think, in 2023 that just dropped off in terms of the level of its play. Fillion, Nimick, Lockery, Caligari in front of them. I don't think any of them really maintained their level from the previous year. So we'll get into what's next, but I think addressing that for me is number one, and that was the big downfall of the season.
Senor Wheeler.
Well, thank you, sir. I feel like there's teams, sometimes when you struggle out of the gate, it becomes very difficult to get back on track. They didn't win a game in their first 10 in all competitions. And it was a lot different than year number 1 under Patrice Gheisar, where it was a very similar number. There was a lot of draws in competitive football, but this team expected to kick on from what turned out to be a decent season. I think that their start to the season shocked them. They brought in a lot of different players to play different positions, and I'm not quite sure that the pieces all fit together. And it seemed like panic set in. And then there's a reason or a culprit why each and every week something didn't go their way, whether it be the refs or one individual or another. It just, for me, it's a big learning curve, a steep learning curve for a very young group of individuals who I think will benefit going forward, that simply cannot happen again. So it was the start of the season more so than anything else. The other thing about their season that's worth mentioning, Adam, 8 penalty goals. Dan Nimick, the penalty king. At one point, we were joking around that he was going to be involved in the Golden Boot race because he was scoring many penalties. But at the same time, all of a sudden, own goals started to be a category that rivaled how many penalties that they made. It was just such a weird season in Halifax, honestly, because their game model, the way that they tried to play, you're like, yeah, okay, you get the method, you understand the process here, but just the outcome simply didn't play in their favor.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing for Dynamic is if he does stay in the CPL, Pogo will probably be his nickname from me going forward, and he probably won't like that too
Not
much.
bad. It's not
Already a
bad.
splash the Halifax Wanderers have made heading into the new season, and that is the addition of Mark Watson as senior football strategy advisor. So we mentioned the players out of contract and the work that he and Mr. Fagan and Mr. Martin and every one of the Wanderers will be doing with Patrice Gheisar to build a competitive roster. But if you were to pick one priority, Oliver Platt, what would that be?
I'm going to pick up where I just left off, which is the defense. And I think obviously there is going to be some change there. The big positive is that they've already found a top level CPL centre back in Nassim Mekadesh, who's had half a season to get accustomed to the team and to Halifax. So that's a big one. I imagine they'll bring Clement Bayer or try to bring Clement Bayer back, who made a very good right back in the second half of the season as well. But Fillian's gone. Looks like Nimick is heading the same way. I think it's been reported by Josh Healy, who, by the way, and speaking of Halifax, did an outstanding job covering them this season.
Agreed.
I believe it's been reported by him that Kel Lockery is not going to be back, so there's going to be change there, and I think Mekadesh potentially Bayer is a great start, but there's going to need to be more additions, including obviously a couple of goalkeepers.
Well, and they'll be hopeful as well, Ollie, that Julian Dunn can have a bounce back from injury as well, which would solidify even further that back line. Wheels, your number one priority?
Well, it's not going to be just about the players in the team. They're away form, guys. They won one game away from home all season long. 6 points. Like that, like how does that happen? This is being a problem year in and year out. That needs to be resolved first and foremost. If I'm going to look at the team, they need another center back. Julian Dunn returning from injury. If he does, he might have to be managed, but that's a top addition and a player that they really missed through injury last season. They need a reliable goalkeeper. I think they need some more cooler heads on the field as well, because I don't think there was a lot of composure or maturity in that group, which is surprising considering some of the names there. And they need some more reliable product up top. I hope that can be Thiago Coimbra, because I think that he is the makings of being that player. Sean Rea from the get-go is a really good foundation to piece to play with as well. So start fitting in the pieces around them. I do think they have some good players there. Probo's an interesting player. Can Farron bounce back and show what he did 2 seasons ago? Like, there's some good players there. So center back, yes, maybe another wide area player to fill the boots of Zachary Fernandez. Another reliable goal scorer up on top, and then I think you have a pretty good foundation to work with.
Jordan.
People underestimate in the CPL what Daniil Henry and Morelli would do for a squad in terms of everyone look to them and listen to them and shut up when they spoke. I think that needs to happen in terms of their nucleus, who they bring in, and just have some respect. This team of Halifax Wanderers, everyone liked the way they played in 2023 because they played like progressive football and kept the ball, and it was very fancy. But when it came to any type of disciplinary situation in 2024, they erupted. Everyone let their emotions go. They got the most red cards, players sent off. They had no discipline and lacked it. I think with this team, you can talk about talent, but you need players in your squad, 2, 3, 4 of them, where everyone looks to and they just give you a look, says, relax. Even if it's not our day, we get a point. They need a nucleus that they could really surround themselves with. I think Rampy is a player that is huge in this league, but if it's a JGL that you're going to rely on, they need more players that can just weather the storm and bring people up when they're having a
8 sendings off in that JGL, by the way. One of those players that was 8 over the course of a 8-game season. Like, that's just, it's way too many. Pacific had 5. No one else more than 3. But you heard it. If you're at their games, they just need to just relax, just play. Again, they have some good players. They play a decent brand of football, but too much petulance for my liking.
And to my point, a manager can only do so much. And you need Warriors on the pitch to do that and just weather the storm.
Yeah, some ownership from the players, absolutely. Though it is something that Patrice Gheisar has admitted needs to be better on multiple occasions throughout the year. And while I was maybe being a bit tongue in cheek about Patrice Gheisar's debut, and I do think he was excellent, I think we'd
Was
rather see him coaching in the Canadian Premier League than holding or wearing a microphone. In that vein, Jordan Wilson, how secure do you think Patrice Gheisar is heading into 2025? Do you think the expectations are different heading into year 3?
this is make or break for him, obviously with his contract situation, but the fact that this will be his third year in the Canadian Premier League, like the first one, you're always going to overachieve a little bit, right? And that's what happened. Like you come in, you don't really know much. You coach League One, everyone's like, "What are you going to do?" The second year, there's going to be a little bit of a dip. The third year has to be the year where like playoffs are secured. They make a run in that. They have a more successful week in to week out season. So for me, this is a huge year for him because you could deduce if you don't get this one right, this will probably be his last year coaching for Halifax Wanderers. So there's pressure on for the young man, which we all love.
Wheels, you agree?
Yeah, the interesting fact is you mentioned it, bringing in Mark Watson, a respected, well-liked individual in Canadian soccer to help that club out. But I believe in Patrice Gheisar and the football that he tries to play. You know, success isn't always linear. And I think that most fans there trust the process as well. They understand what they're seeing and they understand that there needs to be improvement in certain areas. Look, guys, maybe I'm being a little bit over the top and I've been branded as a Halifax Wanderers hater before, which is patently untrue. It's just my analysis based upon performance. But I think that this team has players and a foundation here that I think that they should be contenders for the North Star Cup this season. I think they're going to be right in the mix. I think of all the teams that are in a position to make a jump with some savvy, just 2 or 3 savvy offseason additions, I think they can put themselves right in the mix. Sort out your away travels, boys. This Halifax Wanderers team. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that they're hosting the championship game next year. I'm going to be bullish. I'm going to be backing the Wanderers in 2025.
Of takes. How hot is it, Ollie? Is it a scorching hot take, or is it maybe more lukewarm than you think?
I just think he'll understand this. It's part of being in Halifax. Like, you get a lot of benefits of having a fan base that's engaged and as passionate as and enthusiastic as that one is, and you can't have the good without some of the pressure that comes with it, right? So I think there's some pressure on him after a disappointing second season to bounce back, but this is someone who's a highly regarded coach, I think, in Canadian coaching circles, and I would back him more likely than not to get this right.
Well, keep that smiling face up on that screen, please, and thank you, producer Holly, because I want to ask Ollie, is that take from Wheels contender? Is that outlandish?
There we go.
Or do you think that Wheels is onto something, Oliver Platt?
Wheels up.
I hadn't really, gone that far in my thinking into, thinking about potentially, as my screen goes off there, a
shout out Roku, proud sponsor of One Soccer Today.
30-minute delay. I hadn't gone as far as thinking about a Halifax home final, I'll admit. But look, if Wheels is on board, you know me. I've been on the Wanderers ship since day one. I've been let down a few times, so I'm ready to get my heart.
If Patrice wants to know who to get, come talk to me. First of all, I need a goalkeeper. I got some ideas there too, and then from there, I got some players.
Jordan Wilson,
your question was it wild to say that they'll be contenders? Absolutely. With all of my being, that is wild to say it right now. For them to be contenders. They're not going to be better than Calgary, Forge, York, or Ottawa.
Says who?
Contenders? They're not. They won't. I will. Making playoffs is where they need to be. And I think
Jordan, as we tape this, Jordan,
Mekadesh could be the best defender of the Canadian Premier League.
Contenders, guys? What are we saying?
Jordan, as we tape this, you just said York United. They don't have anyone signed.
Don't worry about it. York's always there, bro. They always
find
yes. Fine. So then I have 1 minute, and I want a convicted answer from you, Oliver Platt. What is their ceiling next year?
I don't want to put a ceiling on them.
I think ceiling on them. Just do it. Get a hammer and some nails.
I think they're going to be in the 3rd to 5th range.
You know what, Adam? I've seen Oliver Platt go down with the Wanderers ship before. He's been scarred
before. That's true.
To the moon with Halifax Wanderers. Here we go.
All right, if Will said so, then sure.
You guys are wild for this. Their
You know I'll
ceiling
always
is
be on this show.
their ceiling is making a run in playoffs, and I think that's big for that club.
Come on.
Whatever the ceiling ends up being, we know that there's going to be about 1,000 more people in the stands at Wanderers grounds next
Love
year. And we're
that.
excited for that, amongst
Yes.
many other things. Keep it
Go
going,
on,
Halifax
Halifax.
Wanderers. A good recap and preview on OSC. Thanks for joining us.